Line and John met on their first day in college. Both were studying business administration, and as fate would have it, they found themselves in the same class. From the moment they exchanged greetings, there was an unspoken connection, a silent understanding that neither of them could explain. At first, it was simple glances across the lecture hall, quick smiles in the corridors, and occasional study sessions in the library. But as days turned into months, admiration blossomed into something deeper. They became inseparable, their love growing stronger with every passing day. By the time they completed their studies, there was no doubt in their minds they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. Their parents, delighted by their love, took charge of the wedding preparations, ensuring everything was perfect. And so, with the blessings of their families, Line and John exchanged vows in a grand ceremony, surrounded by friends and loved ones. Life as a married couple was beautiful. Their home was filled with laughter, dreams, and the hope of building a future together. When Line discovered she was pregnant, their joy knew no bounds. They eagerly prepared for their first child, decorating the nursery, buying tiny clothes, and imagining the wonderful life they would provide for their baby. But fate had other plans. The day of delivery arrived, and tragedy struck. Their baby did not survive. The pain was unbearable, the sorrow no words could describe. Line and John held each other through the storm, mourning the child they never got to know. Time passed, and though the grief remained, they found solace in each other. When Line conceived again, hope was rekindled. This time, they were extra cautious, praying every day for a different outcome. But when the day of birth arrived, their hearts were shattered once more. Their second baby did not make it either. Leaving the hospital felt like walking through a nightmare. John held Line's hand tightly as they stepped outside, their world darkened by grief. The car ride home was silent, except for the sound of Line's quiet sobs. When they arrived, their once joyful house felt unbearably empty. John gently guided Line inside, her body weak, her spirit broken. She sank onto the couch, staring blankly ahead, tears streaming down her face. John knelt beside her, holding her trembling hands. "We will get through this," he whispered, though his own heart ached. "Together." Line turned to look at him, her eyes filled with sorrow yet searching for hope. Days turned into weeks, and the pain of losing two children still weighed heavily on Line's heart. But just when she thought she had endured enough, a new storm began brewing, this time from within her own family. John's mother, Margaret, had never truly accepted Line. And now, with two lost pregnancies, she saw the perfect opportunity to voice her long-hidden resentment. This woman, Margaret said one evening while visiting their home, she must have done too many abortions while she was in college. That's why she can't give birth to a healthy child. The words cut through Line like a blade. She clenched her fists beneath the table, her eyes burning with suppressed anger. How could a mother say such a thing? She wanted to defend herself, to scream that she had done no such thing. But instead, she chose patience. She inhaled deeply, forcing a smile. "God knows my heart," she said softly, then excused herself to the bedroom before her tears could fall. John, sitting silently, could only sigh. He loved his mother, but he knew she was wrong. Months passed, and despite the pain, Line held on to hope. When she discovered she was pregnant again, she fell to her knees, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. "Dear God," she prayed daily, "please protect this child. I don't care what anyone says. Just let me hold my baby alive." The long-awaited day arrived. The pain hit Line in waves, sharp and unrelenting. John rushed her to the hospital, gripping her hand tightly. Hours passed. The delivery room was filled with tension, nurses moving quickly, doctors giving instructions. And then, a cry filled the air. John held his breath as he waited. Finally, the nurse handed Line their child, and she gasped. It was a baby girl. Tiny, delicate, and wrapped in a warm blanket. But one thing stood out, her ears. They were unusually large, almost bigger than her head. Lynn stared at her daughter in amazement. She had prayed for this moment and longed to hold her child alive. And here she was. But why did she look like this? The joy in the room was quickly interrupted when Margaret, John's mother, stormed in. She took one look at the baby and let out a bitter laugh. "This woman must be cursed," she exclaimed. "How can she give birth to such a child? Look at those ears. This is not normal." Lynn's heart ached, but she held her daughter tighter. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "She is my blessing," she whispered, her voice steady. John, despite his own initial shock, stood by her side. "Our daughter is perfect," he said firmly. When they returned home, news of the baby spread quickly. Soon, villagers started gathering, eager to see the child. Some whispered in shock. "What kind of baby is this?" Others murmured, "Is this a curse?" But despite the gossip, Lynn and John remained strong. They loved their daughter deeply, no matter how she looked. Days passed, and the village talk slowly faded. In the warmth of their home, Lynn watched her baby sleep peacefully, her tiny hands curled into fists. For the first time in years, she felt whole. This was the child she had prayed for, and nothing else mattered. Time passed, and little Michelle grew up into a bright and determined girl. Her parents adored her, showering her with love despite the whispers and stares from the neighbors. However, the outside world was not as kind. When Michelle joined the neighborhood primary school, she quickly became the center of attention, for all the wrong reasons. "Look at her ears," some classmates whispered. "She looks like a cartoon character," others laughed. The teasing never stopped. Every break time, when other children ran to play games, Michelle was left sitting alone. No one wanted her on their team. "She might fly away with those ears," one boy mocked, sending the others into fits of laughter. Michelle fought back tears but never let the pain show. She focused on her books, telling herself that one day, success would silence them all. And she was right. Despite the bullying, Michelle remained the top student in her class. When the final exams came, she passed with flying colors, earning herself a place at the neighborhood secondary school. Secondary school was supposed to be a fresh start, but the past followed her like a shadow. The whispers continued. The stares never ended. Boys and girls alike mocked her behind her back. But Michelle was no longer the timid girl she used to be. She had grown stronger. She ignored the cruelty and poured all her energy into her studies. And just like before, she excelled. When the national exams results were announced, Michelle had passed with distinction. She was ready to join the university. And that's when something unexpected happened, something that would change her life forever. He introduced himself, offering his hand. One Sunday, after the church service, Michelle was heading towards the exit when she heard a voice behind her. "Excuse me, Michelle." She turned to see a young man smiling at her. He was tall, well-dressed, and had an air of confidence about him. "I'm Brian," he introduced himself, offering his hand. Michelle hesitated but eventually shook his hand. "I've seen you in church for a while," Brian continued. "You're always so focused, so determined. And, I don't know. I just wanted to talk to you." Michelle tilted her head, confused. "About what?" Brian took a deep breath and smiled. "I like you, Michelle." "No, actually, I love you." Michelle's heart skipped a beat. Was this a joke? Another cruel prank? She crossed her arms, her voice laced with doubt. "How can you love someone with big ears like me?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Brian chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I don't see big ears. I see a smart, strong, and beautiful girl who never lets anything bring her down." For the first time in years, Michelle felt something warm in her heart, hope. They talked for a while, laughter filling the air as they got to know each other. Before they parted ways, Brian handed her his phone. "Let's keep talking before we join university," he said. "I'd love to know you more." Michelle smiled and saved her number in his phone. As she walked home, she couldn't stop thinking about Brian's words. For years, she had believed she was unlovable. But maybe, just maybe, love was finally finding its way to her. Years passed, and Michelle and Brian continued their journey together. Their bond grew stronger as they joined the same university, supporting each other through every challenge. Brian never wavered in his love for Michelle, and Michelle, once insecure about her looks, now walked with confidence, knowing she was deeply loved. After 4 years of hard work, they both graduated with top honors. It was time to take the next big step in their lives, marriage. When they returned home, Brian wasted no time. He visited Michelle's parents with his family and officially asked for her hand in marriage. Michelle's father, John, smiled with pride. "You have proven your love for our daughter. We bless this union." Brian's parents were equally excited. "Michelle, you are a strong and wonderful woman. Welcome to our family." With both families in agreement, the wedding preparations began. Michelle and her mother visited the best bridal shops to choose the perfect wedding gown. She tried on several dresses, but when she saw herself in a flowing white gown with delicate lace details, she knew it was the one. Brian, on the other hand, picked out a sharp black suit with a crisp white shirt and a matching tie. He wanted to look his best for the woman he loved. The wedding committee, made up of close family and friends, worked tirelessly to ensure everything was perfect. The venue was a beautiful garden filled with flowers, the menu was selected carefully, and the guest list was finalized. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived. The sun shone brightly, blessing the occasion with its golden rays. Michelle stood before a mirror, adjusting her veil. She looked stunning, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly beautiful, not because of how she looked, but because she was loved and cherished. Brian, standing at the altar, could barely contain his excitement. He watched as Michelle walked down the aisle, her father proudly holding her hand. The guests stood, admiring the bride's elegance. When Michelle reached Brian, their eyes met, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. The bishop smiled as he looked at the couple. "Marriage is a sacred bond," he said. "Brian, do you take Michelle to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and cherish her for all the days of your life?" Brian's voice was firm. "I do." The bishop turned to Michelle. "Michelle, do you take Brian to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Tears of joy welled in her eyes. "I do." With those words, the bishop smiled. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." The crowd erupted in cheers as Brian lifted Michelle's veil and kissed her gently. After the ceremony, the couple was given time to take photos with family, friends, and relatives. Laughter and joy filled the air as they posed in beautiful settings, capturing memories that would last a lifetime. The reception was lively, with music, dancing, and a delicious feast. Michelle and Brian took their first dance as husband and wife, lost in each other's arms. As the night came to an end, Michelle looked at Brian and whispered, "We made it." Brian smiled, holding her hand. "And this is just the beginning."